This episode is sponsored by Medicine Based Beauty, where beauty is backed by science. Hello and welcome to Cultivate CNY. This week's guest is a woman who needs no introduction. She is a proactive leader in our community, and she is the president and CEO of the Central New York Community Foundation. In this episode, we talk about her path to leadership, communication, triggers, being the first one, and the importance of having support as a leader. Without further ado, let's welcome Melanie Littlejohn to Cultivate CNY. Melanie Littlejohn, welcome to Cultivate CNY.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you for taking the time to sit down with me. I know you are very busy lately, running around as the new president and CEO of CNY Community Foundation. Before we get into all of the amazing things that is happening, that's going on for you, I would love to talk a little bit about you as a person. And I think it's really important to share the journey, but also to just talk about who you were as a child or maybe what you did as a teenager for fun, stuff like that, because I think that all plays a role into our journey.
Yeah.
So, who was Melanie Littlejohn as a little girl?
Oh, so who was Melanie Littlejohn as a little girl? Sassy. That's what my mother and grandmother would say. Um, Sassy, but full of love and energy. Um, Always a hugger. I was and was still to this day. Um, I love puppies and dogs specifically. My grandparents, one of the things that they did, and this was really foundational as well. I talk about my parents and my grandparents and my great grandparents um, everywhere I go. And it's because I didn't realize the foundation that they were building in me. And both my great grandparents and my grandparents worked with people who had developmental disabilities, adults who had developmental disabilities, and some of the adults that they worked with also lived in their homes. So watching my grandparents and great grandparents lovingly embrace people who were a little bit different than themselves, who knew at that moment that was seed planting? And it became the foundation of my life because it's just about s- standing in the gap, helping people who need a little bit of extra love in their life, and looking past and through differences and seeing humanity at the other end of it. So I watched that growing up. And why I point this example out is because when I was a little girl and I would go spend the summers with my grandparents, um, I had the opportunity to really kind of hang out with people and help them and help my grandparents, whether it was reading to someone or Margie, who Margie had a special place in my heart. Um, and developmentally, we probably were around the same age. And so me and Margie would just go play all day together. And Margie was one of the kindest, sweetest human beings on the face of the planet. And we had this level of connection. So, yeah, so as a little girl, I got really lucky to see how we all should embrace humanity. And I thank my grandparents, my great grandparents, and my parents because they've all followed suit,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So I got a chance to see that. So that's who I was as a little girl, right? I used to love hanging out with adults, love hanging out with puppies and doggies um, and was sassy all to boot.
Were you sassy or did you just know what you wanted?
I knew what I wanted, and I don't think I've really changed since then.
Yeah.
Um,
Maybe
had
you were
clarity of
spicy.
spicy. I like spicy.
Yeah, because you have a lot of
Spicy.
love to give.
Yes, that I do.
Yeah.
I do, and nothing has changed.
I have found that, the best leaders are often those with the biggest hearts and
Yeah.
that are the most generous with their energy. Would
Yeah,
you agree?
I would agree.
Are there any leaders in Central New York that kind of go along with that belief that have inspired you in your journey?
Yeah, there have been a bunch, some of whom I think you and this wonderful organization of yours are familiar with, whether it's the Gwen Weber McLeods, Kim Townsend, Candace Campbell Jackson, whether it's Susan Crossett, Darlene Kerr, Ann Messenger. I mean, the list is extensive. We got a lot in common too, because probably the list that I rattled off are primarily women. They're not all exclusively women, but those that jump right to the front of my mind and my heart because I've watched them lead,
Mhm.
and they're great inspiration. Evelyn Ingram,
Mm.
you know. So the list is a long, powerful list.
All women with big hearts, but are also all in their own right, like very much larger than life, would you
Hmm.
say? Very big personalities, which I adore. I mean, there's something to be said about that. I think there's a commonality with great leaders and those characteristics.
I
S-
think it's about being authentic, right?
Yeah.
Uh, our personalities, this is who you get, is who I am, right? And I think it's the women that I have just shared their names. It is really about this is who I am. Embrace me. This is what you will get, but you will get 200% of me.
Mhm.
But this is who I am.
When you were heading into college and starting to figure out what was your life going to be career-wise, did you go into, the major you chose in college or just your career in general with the intention of helping people and making this region a better place?
No, that's not what I thought when I was going into college, right? Matter of fact, probably the most confusing time I had was when I first went into college, right? Because the world was really trying to focus on giving me an idea of what I thought I wanted. At first I thought I wanted to be a lawyer, do some work as an entrepreneur at that point. Nope, didn't. It began to evolve. Um, I did work when I was in college, engaged in social justice activities, which probably was my signal of what I wanted to do around service, was being able to lean in on those issues that I cared about. But that wasn't a career, but it was a purpose and a mission for me, but it wasn't a career. Um, so I didn't go into college with a real clear sense of what I wanted, but college shaped me in ways that have that's always led me to a life of service, which was an extension of my upbringing.
Mhm.
Um, and you can help anyone, and you can be of service to anyone in any career that you're in. And that was also a lesson I learned, but it wasn't until many, many years later that I learned that.
Are you ready to take your career, connections, and professional growth to the next level? The 2025 CNY Women's Summit is just around the corner on March 7th, and this is your chance to be a part of an empowering day filled with inspiring speakers, interactive workshops, and meaningful networking opportunities. Early bird tickets have already sold out, but don't worry, standard tickets are still available. But here's the thing, they're going fast, and you don't want to miss out. So, as a thank you for being a part of our wonderful podcast community, we're offering you $10 off your ticket when you use the code Cultivate CNY at checkout. Don't wait. Head over to cnywomensnetwork.com/summit to grab your ticket today, and let's make 2025 the year of bold moves and big wins. What eventually led you down the path to become the VP of Community Engagement for National Grid? How did you land that? Because you weren't just in Central New York your whole life. You had worked in New
Right,
York and
right, right. I when I think about my career, boy, was it full of adventure. I am from, I grew up in Jamaica, Queens, New York, so people will still hear my accent, my New York City accent. 35 years later, I still can't, doesn't go anywhere. But I had a career on Wall Street in international banking, moved upstate, could not find a similar career, and stumbled into nonprofit. You know how I talked about social justice and some of the work that I did in college? Well, wow, how did it come full circle? I worked for a nonprofit organization focused on social justice related issues, the Urban League, and had a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to work for some powerful and um, leaders. And Bill Johnson, who was the CEO of the Urban League of Rochester, and then Leon Modesti, he was the CEO of the Urban League of Onondaga County. I had a tremendous, tremendous experience working with them. Those were other powerful and leaders who were empaths as well, and led with big hearts and big personalities. Um, so I was fortunate. But during my career during a nonprofit, one of my board members tapped me on the shoulders, and he said, "Time to jump back into the corporate world." And at that point, it was the corporation I then joined was Niagara Mohawk, which was the predecessor company to National Grid. And said to me, um, "Yeah, it was time. I watched what you were doing here in this organization, and those skills are transferable, and I think they'll make a difference at Niagara Mohawk." And 30 years later, I hope I can say it made a difference.
I'm sure you did. And that
Hopefully.
did not come, easily, I'm sure. What did that career look like for you, holding that position?
That was also those were defining years. When I first started at National Grid, um, I was in human resources, actually doing diversity. It was called diversity management. Just think about that word. You had to manage diversity, right? Um, and that was eye opening for me. Being one of the youngest in this field at that point in time, female and African American. It was I learned how to engage people in really meaningful and courageous ways. Um, and then after my first stint in human resources, I moved what they call the business side. And another dear mentor leader, his name was Mike Kelleher, um, came to me and he said, I watched you doing a good job even when no one was watching. And, your level of integrity and commitment um, is some of the most important skills and assets that this organization needs. So I want you to come over to my organization. And I did. And then that's when I was Niagara Mohawk and National Grid's first woman of color officer in the company's history. Um, and that's
Wow.
not always easy. Sometimes being the first, the only is
Mhm.
very lonely.
Oh, yeah, without a doubt. It's
Yeah.
what were some, can you recall any of those moments where you were like, "Wow, I am so alone in this." And how did you kind of resolve that? Because you can't stay lonely forever. You need to find your way out of it
Can't stay
eventually.
lonely forever. But what I learned or what I experienced was the importance of allyship. We talk about what an ally looks like. Well, the team of people that I had the privilege of working with, um, primarily men, primarily white men on my direct team, to this day, I absolutely adore and have so much love and respect for them because they were allies in moments that were tough. They were allies in moments where many might not have been. I tell this story often regarding um, going to a very large customers organization because I was responsible for large customers. And I went with someone on my team. And this was my first time meeting the CEO of this organization. And the person who managed that relationship, obviously on my team, when we walked in, the CEO said to the person who's on my team, "I thought you were bringing your boss with you." And I'm like, froze for a second, and the person on my team says, "This is my boss, and she is tremendous. You're really going to like working with her. She's the smartest person I've ever worked with." That was a powerful moment for me. It's a powerful moment for the customer. Customer's mouth was agape. So what do? I used humor because sometimes that's important for me
Mhm.
and how to connect and communicate. I said, "All right, you better close your mouth unless a fly is going to get in it." And to this day, I now have a really good relationship even with that customer because we resolved
Mhm.
the moments of being uncomfortable. So I saw what allyship looks like. I saw the need um, to respond directly to issues that made being the first and the only very lonely.
Mhm.
Um, and sometimes you felt like you were odd person out, right? But it's in those moments that I learned my greatest skills, um, or honed my greatest skills around communication and engagement, around dealing with hard, thorny issues.
Were you always able to, confront matters head on and be that leader, or did it take a little bit of kind of honing those skills over time?
It took time. It took time because at first you're not sure, and it's okay. You have to figure out the organization. You have to figure out your environment. You have to learn all of that surrounds you. So sometimes it's better just to sit and listen and observe. And I had to do that at first. So I didn't always step into things probably the right way sometimes. But over a period of time, I learned how to communicate and engage people in a way in which I thought they could hear me.
Yeah, and even using humor in a moment like that, I feel like that was a way for you to use compassion, obviously acknowledging the elephant in the room, but in a way that still allowed space for vulnerability and humility to come through for that client. You're lightening the mood so they can say, I was wrong. So they can be vulnerable, right?
Yep.
I think it's like at the end of it all, it's always love and compassion.
hmm Grace. It is how we give each other grace. And that is what is important, more important now than ever before. We don't give each other grace.
Hmm.
And you get an opportunity to give each other grace. Now, if things keep on happening, then you have to find a different way to engage to be effective. But I really believe it's important to give people grace.
For the women that are listening that are leaders or
hmm
maybe emerging leaders still
hmm
figuring things out, is there any, you know, tips you would give to someone that needs to set a boundary or at least just needs to advocate for themselves in an environment where they feel like the odd one out?
Listen and know your surroundings first. Look for the ally in the room, in the organization, in the department. Talk and engage with that ally so that you really do understand an environment. Know where your red line is.
Hmm.
Because oftentimes we don't know where our line is until someone steps over it. Know your hard, we're not doing this today. Know what that trigger is. Think about how you would respond in advance if someone hits your trigger. Because sometimes what I've found that happens is someone may be triggered and paralyzed in terms of their response.
They're in the freeze
They're in the freeze,
state.
like, I can't believe you said that.
But truly practicing
It's
is
practicing,
important.
right? Because I wish I could say you will never be triggered, but you will.
Hmm.
But you need to know what it is that triggers you. And then you need to figure out how would you communicate in that moment? Because unfortunately, in your career or life, you will be triggered. Something, someone, or some scenario will trigger you. Just be prepared. Be prepared. Think about what you would need the person to understand about why that trigger causes great pain or frustration or anger or sadness, and communicate in a way in which you think someone can hear you.
Do you find that as, a very intuitive leader, someone who, I mean, you're a natural. I'm sure you can walk into a room and read it in
Mhm.
2 seconds flat. You can meet someone and understand how you need to speak to them in 2 seconds flat. But where do you think people struggle the most when it comes to communication in the boardroom or even just in our day-to-day lives one-on-one?
Not listening, responding only from your set of experiences. I was in a boardroom once. It was with a nonprofit organization, but there were lots of corporate people on the board. There was a, a push around doing something in the evening. I was a young mother at that point in time, and the guys were, no, Melanie, no, we have to. do this.
Yeah.
And it has to be now. Well, why can't you do it? And I said, well, guys, if I had a wife at home, maybe I could do it. And it stopped everyone because when you look at life through just your lived experience, just your lens,
Mhm.
it stymies conversation. And so, one of the things that women in particular, because we sometimes may pause and not want to respond and just to sit there and hope we can muscle through it, always trying to make a way. It is okay to stand up for yourself. And you don't have to scream or yell. You don't have to do any of that. Right. And then remember, that's also the perception is that that's what we're going to do. We're going to become unhinged. Mm-mm, no. Um, take your lived experience, share it. Take that moment where you feel that you are going to unravel and reverse it. And reverse it. Reverse it in a question back to someone else. Hey, Bob, do you have someone at home that's going to do? How's that work out for you? Because
Yeah, it's kind of like instead of like reacting, because it feels like a personal attack, because they're in a way, I think it might even feel like they're choosing not to understand you.
mhm,
But truthfully, they just don't understand.
they
But
right,
in
right.
a way, when you ask that question, you're like putting the ball back in their court and letting them fumble it instead of
Reacting.
reacting and getting triggered by the situation.
It is so liberating
I bet. You're
to
one of the most, like, stoic people I've ever met too. Like, truly. I was going to bring that up, like, this level of groundedness in who you are and what you have to say. Have you always been like this? Have you always been able to carry yourself with so much power?
over over time, I've gotten more still,
Mhm.
but life helps you get that way, right? It's like you will not get me off my center.
Mm.
Mm-mm. And there's so much power in that. There is so much power in being grounded. I rarely raise my voice. And if I begin to speak even lower, you know you have ripped your pants with me,
Mhm.
right? I don't need to swear. And now I will tell you, every now and then one slips out.
Yeah.
But um, because I can't give anybody any power over me like that.
Yeah. Well, I also see it as, like, a way to conserve and protect your energy.
Hmm.
And as a leader that's doing the things that you're doing, you quite literally can't afford
Cannot.
to become emotional over a situation that should not even be happening in the first place. But you're right. I mean, one of like the 48 laws of power is like say less, basically.
Yes.
The less you say, the more power you have.
Right. Again, you know that there used to be a secret deodorant commercial that says, "Never let them see you sweat."
In a way, we need to give leaders and give women the space to be vulnerable and share about their experiences, which is why mediums like this is so great to like
It's
really
powerful.
hear
Hmm.
about the dark and tough side of it. But when you're in the boardroom and you do want to maintain this level of respect and just this maintain this perception too. I mean, that's part of it as much as we might not like to admit it, if you want to lead an organization like CNY Community Foundation,
Hmm.
you have to be able to put on that mask and be the leader you everyone needs you to be, because it's not just about how you feel in the moment or how you feel people are respecting you. It's you're really like You have a duty to be a certain leader.
Here's the thing that's really important, I think, for women, not only these types of discussions, right? Because these are critical. I think you need to have your Fab Five, right?
Yeah.
Who are your sister friends that you have in the background that you can release? Just release, right? Release sometimes the fatigue of being a leader, being a female leader, being a female leader of color. It Where can you find that space just to be? So I encourage every woman, find your tribe, find your group of, and these are your closest friends and confidants. Have that, because the journey of leadership is so important. And I've heard Gwen Weber McLeod say this all the time. Leadership, the leadership journey is something we don't do alone, right? So I need to have that space of, okay, phew, that was a tough day. Here's what's happened to me. So and so, what happened? Did this ever happen to you? Of course, it typically is, right? What did you do? Because sometimes you just need a release,
Mhm.
right? And that's what we need to ensure women know. Keep that circle of people around you that can love you when you need the most love, can lift you up when you had a bad day, to say either I understand this walk because I've been on it, or just that unyielding support. It is it is critical that we all have that.
Mhm. And I think as like women leaders that are the first to go, they I mean, in a lot of cases in their own lives, they have been the one. They have been the one that has taken on the responsibility of lifting other people
Mm,
up, right? And being that support system for everybody else. I mean, that's what you do as a leader.
that's what you do.
But it doesn't mean that you deserve to not have that same support.
Yep.
So I think maybe the toughest part is finding those people,
Mhm,
finding the women that are as goal driven and have the big dreams that you share, but it's by no means, leadership is not something done alone. Gwen is the best,
yeah.
but um that's why I started doing what I'm doing because I all my closest friends, I've had an interesting journey with education. I think I didn't do the 4-year route after college, and I noticed that that's where a lot of people do meet some of their closest lifelong
Mhm,
friends.
mhm,
And I started working really young and supporting myself, so I immediately felt separated from all of my closest friends from high school that were pursuing other types of career routes. And I just, I think I've felt lonely for a very long time, but
mhm.
nevertheless, I have also been always been very goal driven and have always dreamt of having a big career. Um, so, one of the main things that they say in every entrepreneur book and podcast is the first thing you need to do is find a mentor. Like you're going to need a mentor. And then you're also going to need a community, if you will. Everyone uses that word community, but it can look like so many different things.
Mhm,
You can even build community around, your fitness life,
mhm.
just to have those people that you resonate with, that support you in whatever it is that you need to be doing. That's part of the gig, and I think a lot of people forget about that.
And it's so um, important, because I think the first thing that you're doing with this network is allowing so many like-minded people to coalesce. And guess what's going to happen? People are going to coalesce. They're coming to these events. They're going to start seeing the same people. They're going to network with each other and find out, wow, wow, our journeys are like this. And guess who now becomes a part of that circle, your your inner circle, your circle where you can take off every mask.
Mhm.
You can um just be.
Yeah, exactly. And that's such an important part of it too. It's not just about growing your network and cuz you're still wearing that mask, right? When you go to those networking events, you're still being the person that you want people to see, but it's that extra layer of like, okay, but who are you really letting in? Who
Right.
are you truly, letting see you? And
Mhm.
I I think it depends on what season of life you are in,
Mhm.
but um it's become abundantly clear to me, especially lately, is like, okay, but you still need to make sure your needs are being met, and you're not just making sure everyone else feels connected.
Right.
Like, you need to feel connected and supported too, or else you can't continue doing this because it's the burnout is real when you're lonely.
You cannot pour from an empty cup.
Yeah.
So sometimes you need to have that moment of refresh and renewal. You have to you need the moment of feeling supported. You need that or and you need the moment of um showing your warts
Yeah.
and then someone saying, "Okay, let me tell you how you could get rid of that.
Yeah.
Let me tell you what you need to do." But you trust that they are lovingly going to help you remove that wart.
Mhm.
Or you got that war scar from that bad meeting or several bad meetings. And you have someone who's lovingly going to say, all right, here's the healing balm. Well, now put on that war scar, right? Um, that's what Alex needs. That's what Melanie needs. Anyone who is in this leadership moment, that's what we all need, the journey,
Mhm.
every step of the way to the journey. And sometimes I think when we say the word leadership, people think CEO, people think vice president. No, it's the supervisor that works on third shift, right? It is the individual contributor who's leading a project. It's that frontline worker that has to deal with grace every day with customers on the other end of a phone. Everyone can lead in a moment. Sometimes your title says you are a leader, and sometimes it doesn't. You can lead in your community, you lead in your household, you lead in your family. We're all leaders. Leadership shows up in different spaces and places and time.
With everything that's happening, with your organization, CNY Community Foundation,
Yeah.
you guys have a lot that you're taking on. I'm so excited for all of the innovation and amazing things happening for this region.
Yeah.
Is there a specific project that you're working on that you're particularly excited about right now?
So I think there are two things. One, the community foundation has done amazing work even before I got there. Um, but the work that we continue to do around equity, lead, and literacy are foundational to healthy communities and healthy people. Um, and when I think about the impact that the foundation can have on the lives of children specifically, that's what makes me get up each and every day. right? I don't want one child in this community to be um, impacted by lead poisoning because lead poisoning, the ripple effect that it has on a young person's life is so damaging. And we have the power to change it.
Mhm.
Um, and reading, reading unlocks possibilities. And I want to ensure that everyone gets the keys to the lock. And that's what literacy is. And equity, do I even need to say why that is important? Everybody has to be at the table, not just sometimes, all of the time. Um, and in the micron moment, how do we as a community really ensure that all boats rise during this moment? And so the work that we're doing around the community priorities document, um, and leaning into those things that have a fundamental impact on the lives of Central New York residents. I couldn't be more excited to be a part of it. It's the most difficult and challenging work I've done in my career, but it is the absolute most deeply meaningful work I've ever done in my career as well.
I could only imagine.
Yeah.
What do you think is going to be one of the biggest hurdles that CNY has to jump in order to sustain this micron investment?
Um, I think we really, really have to understand the impact of poverty
Mhm.
and how deep the issues that poverty has created, whether it's in an urban setting or a rural setting. Poverty is has created so many deep holes, but we got to figure out as a region in this moment, we got to be courageous, innovative, collaborative. We must not let um, all of the outside noise sway our belief on what humanity looks like. Poverty and the eradication of it is number one issue because there's so much to
Yeah.
unpack.
In moments like these where we are so grateful and excited for the investment, I think it's easy to talk about the good things that are happening,
Hmm.
but there's always work to be done. And the poverty in central New York is kind of, I feel like it's been an elephant in the room. But, there's leaders like yourself and so many other in the region that
Hmm.
have been stepping up and speaking about it, which I obviously is the first step to addressing.
Yeah.
What are some of the holes that you mentioned that poverty is left in our community that you can think about? Some of the things that may break your heart.
Homelessness, right? One of the biggest, just think about um, not having somewhere to lay your head and you have a family, or you live in a family of four, five, or six living in a hotel room with just two beds, um, or that your address changes so much that your kids don't know
Mhm.
what the address is, or the trauma of coming home, seeing what little you have on the side of the road because you've been evicted. Housing is, we are at a critical point in this region, whether we talk, talk about both urban and rural homelessness, it is real. Um, and then we talk about things like childcare, workforce development, K 12. education, those things are real.
Mm.
And for health, for communities to become healthy and resilient, someone asked me recently, well, which one of those do you prioritize? I said, well, do you prioritize whether you eat or you have a house to go in? Which one do you prioritize? If you had to pick, which one would you pick, food or a house? People shouldn't have to make a choice
Yeah.
of whether I eat or whether I have a roof over my head. It shouldn't be a choice. We live in the greatest country on the planet. Not one person should ever worry about, do I eat or do I choose to have a roof over my head? It shouldn't be optional, right? And so that is the moment that we're in. But what I will tell you is I have seen more collaboration and partnership now than ever. We are having tough, hard conversations. We are coming up with innovative ideas. Um, it just continues to be, let's not lose our resolve. Let's not lose the faces of the people we are trying to help. Let's not lose humanity in the process. And and so I think this is a great time in this region. Huge issues, but we have a huge leg up.
There's issues, but there's potential, and there's, you know, energetic leaders like yourself that are willing to put in the work, because
Yeah,
it's going to take some work.
it is.
But it's, collaboration is the heart of everything you guys do with the
Mhm,
foundation.
mhm.
What are some of the collaborations that are public right now that you are you might have initiated and excited
So
about?
there are many things that we partner with, whether it's the Early Childhood Alliance, the new On Ramp, which is the Workforce Development Initiative. There's lots of work being done in the housing space with many different organizations. And the things that we lead are the Literacy Coalition, the lead safe, CNY. Those are the things that we hope, when done in collaboration and partnership, will have great and show great promise and great results.
I'm so excited to see all of the things happening. I mean, I always see something online because you guys are very busy.
Busy.
Busy, busy, busy. What is like I mean, I know every day is different for you, but what is the day in the life of Melanie Littlejohn?
So, before I even leave the house, I always do meditation because I have to get grounded, I have to get quiet, right? Yes, I do those emails before I leave.
Okay. You catch up on communications,
Catch up so that I don't feel quite as
like you don't know what's happening.
right.
Yeah.
And then it starts with meetings, breakfast, lunch, dinner, even snacks, you know. But a lot of that fuels me as well. People give me energy. Then there are those coalitions and really trying to get underneath innovative resolutions to some of these big issues. So I'm doing that all day long. And then I go home sometimes after a dinner or not. Um, I, I go home, and again, I end the day with my family and meditation. And no matter where I am, at 6 o'clock, I'm leaving the room. If it's no more than for 15 minutes, I'm leaving a room
Mhm.
because Mimi has to go talk to her little girl. I have to go see my granddaughter before she goes to bed. and I will break away from anything because everything I'm doing in this moment is for every child. My grandchildren, I have two, a 10-year-old grandson and an 11-month-old little girl. Um, I'm doing to make sure this world is a better place for them. This community is a place that will embrace and love them. This community is a place where they can see promise and possibility. And I'm doing that for every child, every family. I'm doing that, Alex, for your family to be, right? Create an environment where everyone can thrive.
I love how you have that hard stop at 6 p.m. because if if not that, then what is all of this for?
They remind me, my grandchildren remind me of my purpose. And that's the other thing we all need. You need to find what your why is. You know what your why is. You're doing your why, you're living your why. Everyone needs to know what's your why. Why do you exist? What's your mission? What's your purpose?
Yeah, and keep coming back to it,
Never forget it.
especially in those moments and those those trigger
Yep.
moments.
Remember your why.
Yeah.
Mm,
Well, I think that's all for today, Melanie.
thank
I'm gonna end that here, even though I'd love to sit here for hours and just soak up all of the wisdom that you have. But I'm
thank
sure
you.
this won't be our last time sitting down, and I really appreciate you making the time for us today.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
All right, guys, that is it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in to Cultivate CNY. If you enjoyed this episode, I would love it if you left us a review and make sure you're subscribed to the show. Speaking of the show, if you know anyone or if you are interested in being our next guest on Cultivate CNY, be sure to submit us an application. You can just click the link in the show notes. And if you're a business owner that's interested in getting in front of our audience, you can go ahead and email us at podcast@cnywomensnetwork.com to learn more about sponsorship and advertising opportunities. All right, that's it for now. I'll catch you guys next Monday.